I have been invited by a friend, a voluntary hermit in a charming country house surrounded by roses, seeking to forget in its silence and perfume a tempestuous youth in which the tragedy of his soul was consummated, accepting his hospitality for a few days. The graceful building where he welcomes me is white as snow, situated atop a hill nursed by perennial greenery. It is called Villa Esperanza, and this name, inscribed on two small marble plaques by the founders of that house, is half covered today by moss and ancient ivy. It can be accessed by three paths, one from the east, which disappears among thickets and underbrush of pines and palms, another from the west, simpler, among crags and hills crowned by the distant view of the maritime Alps, and a more modern one, comfortable and shaded, which leads us to the clean and elegant city of San Remo. I know that St. Remus was murdered by Romulus, but I do not know why we have sanctified him. At any rate, the name of the legendary victim of the first king of Rome's arrogance seems to me a good omen for what is to follow. After a few days of rest in this refuge, a new guest arrived by the eastern path, a gentleman who, they said, had traveled through Asia, visiting the mysterious India, tested in Tibet, conversing for a long time with the disciples of Confucius. A man of few words, he seemed like adorable company. Very rarely curious, he smoked all day as if he were a glowing ember. A second friend arrived next. Another unrepentant nomad, an Italian who had traveled through France, Germany, Switzerland, England, and then North America, and on his return, Spain, Egypt, and finally Greece. He seemed more melancholic to me than the first. His suitcases were loaded with books, and he read and reread, as if thirsty for knowledge and erudition. A third arrived in a train carriage, a Roman, well-groomed, clean-shaven, dressed in black as if he were part of a procession accompanying a dead man to the cemetery. He gave the impression of being an extremely bored man, and he yawned like the bellows of an organ. At dinner, my friend, the magnificent lord of the house, gathered us around the table, an almost sumptuous meal, eaten in a Trappist silence. No one knew what to talk about. There were 5 of us, all men, and the most uncomfortable seemed to be the host, who elegantly served us the coffee, the black coffee, and spoke thus: "A friend to each of you, I have lived in solitude for years. The habit of being alone makes me abhor prolonged conversations, yet I am prepared to welcome into the modest house of hope 4 friends such as yourselves. I do not believe I have ever hosted 4 members of silence. The reason for such a parsimony of words lies in the scarce knowledge each of you has of the others. No one would say that you find yourselves submerged in the same fishbowl. Allow me to make you better acquainted. Caio Buddhi has spent 20 years researching the truths of the religious East. He has traveled, he has questioned, he has seen, and he reads Sanskrit just as I read the Kabbalah of dreams. Mevio Mephisto is also searching for the secret of Faust. He is in possession of the rarest books of the Germanic Middle Ages. He has scoured London, he has fished out the most curious items in the antiquarian bookshops of Paris, and he has consulted all the sibyls, sorcerers, and priests of the 4th pages. Sempronio Cristiano knows the entire New and Old world of biblical exegesis, all the philosophical polemics of Christ, all the evangelical versions, and he yawns because of this, like a dog that barks without a voice. Finally, you, old comrade, who have turned the propaganda of magic at the end of the 19th century into the courage of a late apostle, and in Italy no less, where no man believes in ideal apostles, charming guests, your wise descriptions loosen the tongues of the daily diners better than 10 bottles of your angelic Nebbiolo, and, once brought into the realm of the argument concerning the truth that lies concealed behind the seeker, the confessions rain down. Time lost for each of the 3. They were 3 defeated men, 3 survivors of an intellectual debacle to which they had devoted their ingenuity and all the forces of their varied culture. They were all tired and were returning from the heroic campaign to a life of apparent mediocrity, with their souls entangled in the mute sphinx, which has not yet answered the ultimate arcane word. To these 3, beneath the full moon, I spoke thus: O worthy figures of the religious and superstitious culture of the peoples, your lamenting words do not meet with indifference in the one who listens to you, and even though my esteemed hospitality may have presented me as an apostle of dead things, I am the greatest friend of the living truth. The 3 of you have taken the wrong path, for you start from a misguided preconception. That man is different today from what he was yesterday, and even worse, that East and West do not resemble each other like 2 drops of water. In the 20th century, faced with the free inquiry of positive science, you seek to evoke the India of Buddha, or the nebulous Middle Ages of the witches' Sabbath, or the theology of Catholic Christian hysteria. This is a dead world that has no living word if science does not purify it of trickery, fables, hallucinations, and dreams. Change your path, and you will find the truth. I am the spirit of the time, and I speak of the search for truth in human science with the freedom that modern judgment advises. In times past, it was considered a horror to grant political rights to the people, just as the priestly castes, whether or not they possessed the knowledge of the mysterious secret that transforms man into a demigod, prohibited the profane from investigating. Today, when political power is in the hands of the most advanced peoples, every problem can be examined by anyone who, from a purely human framework, seeks to arrive at the knowledge of absolute truth. However, I openly censure those who, making a profession of positive science with criteria restricted to the mentality of ordinary life, want to analyze a world that other, uncommon senses reveal. How I detest the mystics, the poets, and the empiricists of spiritualism who set out to build castles out of playing cards. And I say, from the perspective of Italian good sense, with that mediocre good sense that everyone possesses, that the righteous path is stripped of every sectarian proposition and must be pointed out to the investigators of truth, charlatan philosophers, and inquiring scientists of limited senses must take their place in a rational school of culture to show the way to the masses, so that it may mark the limits within which the philosopher must merge with the scientist, and the path toward the conquest of truth for the health of the people. The three of them, overwhelmed, looked at me as at a strangely shaped bird. They understood and waited for me to continue. However, the guest, the least wise among them, added, "And you? Have you not made propaganda for magic up until now?" "Yes, but explaining it as an ancient conception in relation to modernly disseminated knowledge, and because I could not baptize it with a different name, a name that does not exist, a science or group of sciences that ensures the integration of the great human powers in the modern age. I am founding this italic integral school tonight in your Villa Esperanza, between a glass of Grignolino and a Ligurian risotto. Just as Buddha ate and Christ drank, Mephistopheles would add some other sauce to it. And thus I inaugurated it, before a restricted circle of friends, to whom I present my precise ideas, without polish or declamation, or non-existent literary pretensions. I spoke to people who had already read, investigated, and searched a great deal, and who could understand me without too many subtleties of oratory art, thus sparing references to Zarathustra, which would be totally out of place. Chapter 2. Definition of integral science. Why were magic, divination, astrology, and alchemy called occult? There are three explanations. Occult because in their realizations they utilized all the human and physical forces ignored by men, publicly withheld by the representatives of all perceived wisdom. Occult because in the West they found themselves in conflict with religion, mistress of civil powers, which condemned every miraculous manifestation outside the church as heretical. Occult because those who were in possession of a truth that others ignored, whether sects or isolated men, could use and abuse it without control. Should the adjective occult endure as the attribute of these sciences? Reasonably, yes, in the first sense, because there are untaught manifestations that science does not officially explain or recognize. It is true that there is discussion about psychism, about psychic powers, and psychic investigations. However, these forces are in the process of being investigated. They are not yet definitive. In the other two senses, there are no occult sciences, because to print or speak of them we need not fear an ecclesiastical tribunal condemning us, as they condemned Galileo, Giordano Bruno, Campanella, Bori, and Cagliostro. The unknown forces we can refer to in Latin terms as latent or occult. Magic, which supposedly would be classic, sounds bad to many ears that abhor the ancient, especially because the word has been abused. We can substitute it with two words that explain it. Let us call it integral science. To integrate means to take it whole or perfect. Integration is the complementary method of doing science, which is officially taught in universities, completed with the study and knowledge of the latent forces in nature and man. Thus, we shall speak of the integral science of objective nature, natural magic, and human integral science, which is divine magic, because it awakens, exercises, and develops in us the attributes that ignorance, until now, had attributed to the gods. This is with respect to the vocabulary. Explicitly, the program of actions lies in the effort to improve ourselves and others in the knowledge of the individuality latent within us, applying these conquests in real life for the benefit of the less endowed, fighting evil in whatever form of ignorance and arrogance it takes. Whoever feels capable of adding their signature to this ideal program must freely consider themselves a companion of ours, in the name of the light provided by science against all religious and sectarian superstition, for this earth, to which we shall return without the trumpets of the apocalypse that will sound at the awakening of the dead. They will find a great nation of brothers who bless us in the face of the sorrows that the madmen of religious forms have disseminated throughout the centuries, and the sacerdotal furies, true crimes of wicked theocracies, which they have embedded in the history of the instinctive soul that in each of us perpetuates the atavistic memory. I do not know if we will be few or many. I have always preferred the few of goodwill over the many of lukewarm faith when it comes time to undertake, study, or practice. The word and example of the few will transform, like the projection powder of the alchemists, 100,000 times their number. Thus Pythagoreanism spread in Magna Graecia, a precursor to ideal Christianity, neither Catholic nor Protestant. Our school, fully investigative, must not fall prey to philosophy in the sense of idle chatter, nor propitiate theologians in a realm of new babble to be reaped by the scythe of Saturn. Chapter 3. History of the Science of the Soul. This mysterious animal, proud of its wisdom and intelligence, which dominates the entire scale of beings endowed with movement upon the earth, has not yet torn the veil that covers its origins and hides the end of its journey. Until the solution to the enigma becomes public domain, there will be churches, pagodas, synagogues, and mosques. If a new direction, outside the old and cancerous carcasses of the temples, guides the masses, subjected to illiteracy, toward an ideal of fraternity and love as the safest and most natural solution for the social good, a great step will have been taken. However, let it not be thought an idle endeavor to study the sacerdotal wisdom of the most ancient peoples. The ancients were inferior in many things, but the science of the human soul took the priests to the attainment of the secret of divinity. Those who did not know the wireless telegraph, the radio, the dirigible, the automobile, or the airplane scrutinized to the depths the soul of those subjected to the tyranny of castes and the soul of the masses. Theocracies did not concern themselves with man, and, apparently, neither with the gods. Man was the sole enemy of divine power, and state religions always sought the dominion of cunning over the ferocity of the masses, and it was true science that highlighted the danger of the permanent dominion of the few, a science still in its infancy today, because Catholic Christianity and governments have only recently renounced the industrial exclusivity of dealing with the human soul. The crimes of religious faith against the well-being of society, hindered at every step toward the knowledge of the soul, have not yet been historically conquered. It is not men who complete great revolutions, it is the injustice of prolonged arrogance that ripens them. Christianity was born revolutionary and continues as a tyrant over the human mind, and it is condemned either to return to the simple origins of faith, to transform itself, or to perish. Crystallizations belong to the mineral world and not to that of human ideas. Political Christianity, ignorant of the science of the human soul, over which it still wants and claims to preserve the privilege, produced that conventional Middle Ages into which it submerged the ancient, and dictated the origin of the reflowering of magical culture against the Church of Paul and Peter. Hebraicized magic, as a sign of protest by a group of schismatic Hebrews who had given a son to the terrible Jehovah, and diabolical magic in opposition to the new divinities. Thus, just as primitive Christianity absorbed the theocratic powers, forms, pomps, and rites of theocracy, magic and witchcraft perpetuated themselves in strange and fearful hieroglyphs with the dark tenets of the science of the soul, amidst the ruins of the superstitious knowledge of ancient temples. This magic of the school, dictated by men like Arnold of Villanova, Ramon Lull, Pico della Mirandola, Bacon, Beauregard of Pisa, Giovanni Battista van Helmont, Albertus Magnus, Olaus, Avicenna, Trithemius, Paracelsus, must not be confused with the magic of hysterical pathology that led alleged practitioners of the Saturnalias of Astaroth to the stake. From that early magic of the school springs the great river of modern knowledge in every field of research, physics, chemistry, the science of psychic forces and the phantasmal powers of men, hypnotism, and suggestion as therapeutic instruments. They will yet arise, in an exact knowledge of the latent powers in the human organism, as a complement to the biological sciences, and perhaps the intuition of the ultimate evolution of the species. Chapter 4. Hermetic Intelligence. Outlining a study program, and especially the program of a school in a few short pages, does not seem an easy task, but I will not be blamed for brevity. Integral science, reduced to practical magic, and the extraordinary stories and disquisitions of all those who today create poetic theologies on all musical themes regarding the possibility of an accurate science, must not delude us as a panacea of easy miracles, nor make us forget the goal of the investigations. The goal is the integration of man. Never lose sight of it. Leave devils, saints, and archangels where they are for the moment. All your experience must be focused upon man, not upon a man, but upon yourselves, who belong to the proud representation of Olympus on earth. An economical laboratory, you carry it permanently wherever you please. Put yourselves in physical and intellectual equilibrium, with a sober life regimen, without efforts that lead you to the formation of noble ascetics. Observe in silence, in the sacred silence that separates the adept from the vanity of the word, which is not something especially difficult, so that in you the development of hermetic intelligence is fostered, the subtle and penetrating power of the human mind that brings us closer to the innate reality that strikes our human senses. So that we may understand each other and what I mean, I will plainly tell you the significance of this conquest. If you study an algebra problem and you cannot quite find the solution, do not expect success to come. Outside of all premeditation and logical search, a determination of your intellect spontaneously arises, wherein resides the true path, which you will find to be true, that which is produced within you, brought forth by an intellectual light that comes from the noblest part of yourselves, and which seems, by its subtle inspiration, somewhat foreign. This is the hermetic intelligence or light. In the schoolboy who resolves the brief matter of life in high school, in the artist, from the penetration of forms to the sense of art, in the scientist and the unlimited conquest of research. Hermes is the Greek name for the Latin Mercury. Nebo, Hermes, Mercury, Lucifer, and the Holy Spirit are synonyms of the same state of being of human intelligence, whose secret laws still remain hidden from men. All divine forms are possible, if the gradual training of this luminous star of our mind is discovered behind the clouds of all our unbalancing imperfections. One can reach the state of genius, like the daemon form of Socrates, of Numen, as in Apollonius of Tyana, of God the Father, as in the solar type of Christ. It is this intelligence that turns from light into force and gives rise to the forms of objective magic, from magnetism to the projections of psychic forces, to the different forms of mediumship, through the phenomena overseen by an incomprehensible intelligence, in which one feels the spirit of the dead, another demons, and a third the angel. The science of religions reminds you that this formless God within you awakens in silence, in the purity of the innocent. Is it true or not? Do not swear on the word of man, and let the struggle to grasp and define it be played out between yourselves and it. But remember that Christianity also was born as an infant, that is, speechless, through which symbol the child governs the world. Chapter 5. The neutrality of the spectator. If I study a geometry problem and perceive a reasonable answer that harmonizes two apparently contrary things, it is the penetrating judgment of Hermes. I am always myself and always one. Only one thing is proven by experience. When man is healthy in body, without cravings or desires, at peace with himself and his peers, as well as the things that surround him, he is in the fullness of his judging power. The neutrality of man facing the spectacle of the objective world brings him closer to the immutable truth of the sensory images that strike him, because the neutral appearances of the things of the world are conceived as active or negative, according to the neutral, active, or passive state of the spectator. What do I mean by neutrality? Help me with your hermetic penetration to explain myself. Things are not subject to a change of aspect because, considered without soul or passions, they are constant by their natures in the appearance in which they are struck by our senses. If to this hypothetical immobility of their structures, man contrasts a state of conception or sensory perception without desires, without the disturbance of those very desires that must give him the idea of things, he sees and feels them as they are, as neutrally as possible, as truly conceived by him as possible. A chemist who attentively analyzes a body, with the rules and apparatus adapted to his need, is a neutral spectator, in whose hermetic mind he easily finds the manifestation of his adapted powers. A mathematician who studies and develops a calculus formula is neutral before the aspect of the lines and characters that he has drawn. As soon as the neutrality of the observer vanishes, a state of interest or participation regarding the desired result begins, and any intellectual manifestation obstructed or colored by desire is false. This is observed in thousands of examples in therapeutic medicine, when the doctor, through his cognitions, already has his ideas formed about the course of the disease. In Spiritism, in which we find ourselves more or less involved, in the majority of cases writing mediumship does not risk accumulating gossip, because the supposed mediums are not neutral, and, with or without a hypnotic state or trance, they mix 99% of the lead parts of their conscious or unconscious mentality with 1/100th part of hermetic gold. Often poets, improvisers, or novelists are the most perfect mediums because they preserve their neutrality. Believing they are creating a form of art for enjoyment, they do not worry about what they write or sing, letting the hermetic speak entirely. The aspect of the things that strike our senses, despite being constant in photography, in the reproduction of colors varies with the changing light. In us there naturally exists a reproduction mechanism for the colors that vary with the changing light. In us, who naturally have a reproduction mechanism superior to the simple photographic lens, the aspect of things varies not only due to luminous differences but also due to the moral state in which we find ourselves when things are examined. This shows us that the vision of the world, in which one can read good and evil, has as many different subjective aspects as there are men, and as many as there can be within the same men, states and passional nuances. Healthy in body or sick, sleepy or cheerful, in pain or blessed, the things that surround us speak to us differently. Upon understanding the true aspect of things, the state of perfect neutrality is produced, which the perfect equilibrium of ourselves has given us. Chapter 6. Man as a mental unit. Religions had their origin in the idea of bequeathing the divine types to the masses tormented by bestial passions for their governance, and so that they might modify social life. They had theocratic origins, or were formed subsequent to the birth of theocracies. The two great living religions, theocratic or not, Christianity and Buddhism, led us to an excess of anti-scientism, spiritualism and the spirit man, which human logic repudiates. I understand that the spirit man is a seductive idea and a noble fantasy, but with this I do not exclude that it is a scientific heresy of sacred science. All excess is an imbalance of the faculties. Let us establish some fundamental ideas to prepare ourselves. What is man? A garment of flesh, and a mind that reasons, observes, and conceives ideas. We do not delve into all that philosophers and religious men have said. The Church tells us soul and body. Spiritism affirms the existence of a body, a perispirit, and a spirit. Buddhic theosophy divides us into 7 parts. We feel ourselves to be one. We need to carry out an athletic effort to come to feel in ourselves a quid distinct from the body, which we call the mind. In Latin, mens, m abbreviated from meus and honest participle of esse. Therefore mind, for our forefathers, must have meant my entity, my thinking entity, conscious entity. The psyche is the logos of the Greeks. It is not explained thus. Scientifically, an organized, living body with self-nourishing and metabolic functions is a brain that has safeguarded the laboratory of ideas. Ideas know how to transport themselves through the objective world toward us by means of the 5 senses. The brain, the center of sensibilities, takes ideas from the sensory vehicles, processes them, and stores them. Everything added together within us turns us into cerebral gray matter, because if we did not have a brain, we would not have consciousness of ourselves. So our moral and intellective individuality starts from the brain. It is the mind, goddess Minerva from the brain of Jupiter. Is this beautiful goddess the specific result of the ideas that reach the brain by means of sensations, or is she independent of them and survives the physical body? Some say yes, others deny it. Do not believe either of them. There is no science that does not owe its existence to the control of experience. We can say, we know when our personal experience assures us of it. It is also not a matter of believing someone who had proven it upon their own individuality, because you could have one that survives and I might not, or the opposite. Some cite religions, suspicious sources. Priests of good faith may have dreamed, and with bad faith they will have wanted to use a funeral ceremony to keep us deceived. There is a need to read deeply only one book, one's own. These assertions should not be accepted from anyone's hands, nor placed as the basis of science. Do not argue after having studied and practiced. For now consider yourselves as a unity. Say, one is the universal world, and one am I. If I am absorbed in a thought, I am mind. If I eat and digest, I am man. But given that one function is never independent of the rest, I am one. The man aspiring to his integration must, reasonably, develop himself in all his unities, not only feet, stomach, or nose. And this is the key to the question upon which I demand your perspicacity: initiation into a reintegrative science that must not be confused with the theosophies and the 12 religions that want to transform man into an angel who plays the lute before the divine throne, but which aspires, more modestly, for the intelligent beast man to develop to the purity of his powers, sovereign of his destiny and free and just lord of the latent and known forces that nature has given him. If a system of medicine wanted to reduce the entire human organism to the excessive development of nervous sensitivity, it would not create a healthy body. Thus, the religious hypothesis has resulted in so many subjects of the asylum who were then sanctified out of admiration for neuropathies of all forms in the history of faith. I understand that they were mad gods, generous and truly heroic for their social actions in difficult times. But there were as many thousands who were refined delinquents of theology, who brought dishonor not only to paradise but to humanity. Julian the Apostate, who was initiated into the truths, could not conceive that the integral and exuberant paganism of Roman initiation should be replaced by an anti-magical heresy which prepared for death and not for life, and which was called Christianity under the protection of a symbol of death. The human mind must dispose of the physical body and not allow itself to be subjugated by it, without objection and by fatality, given that the first power developed by the mentality is that of directing the forces that prevaricate it. This, the current state of social civilization, already gives to the best educated, because practical education is that which does not let itself be dragged away by the arrogance of instincts. But you, men of life and sagacity, do not believe that whoever appears thus is thus. Today, education, rather than a real predominance of the mind over the body, is of hypocrisy, which skillfully hides the depravity of the men who appear most strongly armed in the struggle. On the contrary, for the man who wants to evolve from the animal state to the integral state, the inhibitory power of the mind over the senses must be real, not apparent. He who, on the contrary, makes himself the dominator of the senses to halt their functions to the point that the day he wishes to make use of them he finds them atrophied, is simply an unhappy neurotic. See from here the abyss that separates the two things, magic and religion. The ascetic is the initiate who strips himself of the need to love. The first feels incapable, the second is voluntarily abstemious. Chapter 7. Rules of Temperance and Conduct. No formulas. My friends, science is also temperance of words. Do you want to get along well? Be of temperate thoughts, sober in actions. Consider your equal as flesh of your flesh. Charity comes from charo, which is flesh. Master your senses, and do not let them gain the advantage over your reason. Make use of things in proportion to your power in their use. Do not reach satiety in anything you desire. Do not prefer to seem and not to be. Be for yourself. Do not covet that which belongs to others out of vanity and self-interest. Aspire to and seek to possess the conscience that would make you better and would be useful to others. Repudiate all that places you above the mediocrities amidst which you live, so that others do not perceive it as a living injustice. Do not consider work as a punishment, but as your contribution to the life of your equals in society. Read the golden verses of Pythagoras, and you will find the advanced gentlemen of our times. So do not ask excessively if everything comes down to this. Peace be with you. For peace to have a place within you, it must happen that you are physically healthy and balanced in your mind, adaptable or adapted to the environment in which you live. Not everyone can choose the environment of our life of peace. The struggle for existence, voluntary errors, the necessities imposed on us by the great society in which we live, often oppress us. Not having known or been able to choose the environment of peace, not being able to or not knowing how to renounce it because our errors must be expiated one by one, implies the necessity of acting upon it to modify it with patience, example, and tenacity. The most active means to render harmless the environment in which one lives with displeasure is to separate it mentally. Anything that you possess can distance you, poison you, or hurt you, even your thoughts, if you are not attentive. Separating it mentally, as something that neither must nor can offend you, and feeling yourselves endowed with the mission of tolerating those who are inferior or bothersome to compel them not to disturb your tranquility, you have conquered and produced a good. The magi of tradition, when they want to preserve their integrity against spirits and creatures of evil, enclose themselves in a circle that they draw with a sword. with your person surrounded by ideal circles, with an olive branch, say, "The unjust shall not manage to shatter my equilibrium." If you, instead of being as you are now, have reached the first steps in the practice of this sublime art of ours, you will know that Hermes shall tell you the word that calms the dogs that bark and shatter the sleep of the just, and gives you the power not to hear them bark. In physical life, use everything and abstain from everything at will, no excess. In moral life, endure the annoying animals that surround you and the daily annoyances. Be patient, learn to put a muzzle on the former, and to protect yourselves from the latter. Never be unjust, and, forgetting that you are nourished by the Christianity that has made us justify so many lies, learn to always be sincere with yourselves. Whoever tells the truth to himself will feel the truth of others. Remember that it is in our laboratory where we must see ourselves as clearly as in the sunlight. Being sincere with oneself is a complicated task. If we manage to strip ourselves of passions, we draw closer to the truth. With the passions that torment us, it is useless to reflect upon ourselves. With a sober regimen of life, without excesses, the body is fortified. If you feel ill, fast. Turn this regimen against passions and desires. Passions are sufferings for desires not achieved or not fully satisfied. Desire soberly, and, when the desire exceeds itself, abstain. This gymnastics makes you masters of yourselves. Thus you will be able to conquer the habit of sincerity and say to yourselves, "I am a weak man, and I must correct myself," or "I am a sluggard, and I must be diligent," or "I feel like a satyr, and I want to become a man." This last example indicates to you that which most distances us from the integration of human powers, the worst sin, the desire of lust, the concupiscence of sexual possession, which makes civil man descend to the level of baboons. Then you will ask me, is it necessary to be of the school of St. Anthony, the abbot, and chaste as anchorites? No, my dear friends. It is necessary to never prostitute oneself, because man and woman prostitute themselves and descend from the human pedestal when they give themselves for the flesh. It is like the vice of the precipice. The need to live must provide us with the bait that we crave, but with the need already satisfied. If we eat merely to feel the taste of the viands, we are swine with a human appearance. Analogously, it is the prostitution of man, in whom it is not the supposedly physical appetite that must determine a satisfaction of the instincts. Let an impure desire never disturb your flesh, and always consider impure every sexual desire in which the breath of the heaviest matter calls you to the sacrifice of your dignity as a man or woman. Consider concupiscence not as Catholic Christians, but as the most evolved men. One of the most aristocratic things in human life is the total giving of oneself, in a moment of oblivion to the universe, because in that moment, the whole universe shines and vibrates within us. It is aristocratic and divine when a true, deep, and intense love is understanding, is light and the manifestation of a world hidden from the eyes of beasts, and which demands of us the sacrifice of the act in the nobility of thought and image. It is the filthiest of things when true and immense love is absent, and the lasciviousness of idleness and blood mires us in mud. Understand me and separate yourselves from the religious forms that have never understood this. The sacrament of marriage is prostituted when the priest blesses a couple that unites without love. Blessed by all the noumena of the Olympian heaven is every aristocratic holocaust, in which man does not forget that he is the living and lived God. The Hebrew law says, "Do not fornicate." The Church of Christ says, "Do not fornicate," who will explain it as clearly and precisely as I have done? Then understand me and understand yourselves. And I conclude a normal man, not paranoid, not neurotic, healthy of heart, without incipient arteriosclerosis, of good digestion, without rheumatism, not scrofulous nor free from any origin of syphilis, capable of enduring 8 hours of work, intellectual in relation to the social functions he fulfills in life, is a perfect type of animal man, civilized or less. To be a man aspiring to ideal integrality, which is the knowledge of the latent forces within us, of the laws of harmony bequeathed to us by universal nature and its forces, whether ignored or ill-defined, the conscious use of the forces and production of intelligent phenomena outside and within us. Mastery of all forms of manifestation of the Hermetic or Luciferian which manifests in us in a normal and continuous way, requires that the mind absolutely dominate the animal and dictate its tastes. In this sense, there is an absolute need to distance oneself from religious forms in which the mental and moral entity of man tries to free itself from the tyranny of the physical body, to realize a hypothetical monstrosity of a spirit man, without a heavy material body. Chapter 8. Foundations of the Italic School. We are taking up the arguments of the first conversations. Then doubts, observations, and brief criticisms will rain down. Whoever returns from intellectual defeats is fearful of falling into the trap. Does he believe that with so little one reaches the miracle? And I no longer believe in printed books and in things done by the herd. But we would like the Master to teach us and call bread, bread, and milk, milk. And then what would happen next? Would this guarantee that we find ourselves in good company? It seems little, it is true, all that I have said. It seems little to cultured men and very little to the uncultured, but the error is to consider the integration of human powers, the divinization of the man-beast, as a comfortable placement on the state railways or in the posts of the kingdom. Comical pretensions in the mouths of people who have studied notable forms of knowledge, aspirations of cretins who have never opened a book. Complete within yourselves the real picture of the highly elevated goal you propose for yourselves, or do not harbor the desire to be laughed at to your face. Devote yourselves more to psychic studies, in the experimental common sense, assisted and verified with mediums. Observe well. Discuss. Fight with the leg of a chair and the creaking of a table, but do not speak, do not desire, do not aspire to speak of magic, of integrations, nor of perfection. An elevated matter among the elevated. It is represented in the sacred Kabbalah of the crown of Solomon and Zoroaster, which seem to be confused with those gilded drawings that actors place upon the head of Sol when reciting the tragedy of Alfieri. The school that we found here in Italy as essentially Latin must have, as a minimum measure, the maximum of good sense. The others have given us nothing. I will give you a very great virtue as a guide, that of reducing things to normal dimensions and not desiring the impossible, as well as not pretending to become overnight a circus freak. The just mastery of oneself, of equilibrium, disinterest, the elevation of feelings, keeping silent, will not make you mutate from apes into gods of Olympus, to whom everything is permissible, without knowing that the gods cannot do everything. Evoked with the ancient rituals, if you know them, a genie like those of the 1001 Nights will appear to tell you, everything that is in accordance with what you ask is in my power. This is a teaching worth a treasure. Not even genies with 100 wings and thousands of eyes can do everything. Philalethes, in chapter 10 of his Introitus, writes of the sulfur that is in sophistical mercury. It is enough to understand that you will obtain things in proportion to what you have in your pocket, which is why some highly excellent youths are hopeless in the study of mathematics or languages, and choose professions that do not adapt to their faculties. Thus, one cannot expect, that everyone can reach very distant ports. The sea of the unknown is immense. There are those who travel at transatlantic speeds, those on sailing ships making do with the gusts, those who go on little fishing boats, and those who go on rafts. Pievano Arlato would say, "The Lord gives according to your strength." I will say, you will obtain according to your worth. Since it is important, above all, that the Hermeticist manifests himself, the light of the Hermeticist will lead to integration, because you will begin to see the outer and inner world in a way, and with a different feeling, from that which you yourselves saw yesterday. I have said that ours must be an integral school, not a sect, church, or synagogue with a pulpit. A school is a method of investigation. It is education, an independent training superior to all the fabulous worlds of religion and the brotherhoods dependent upon it. Learning to see the true face of things under the ray of a new light, as it is not conceived by ordinary philosophers, the indifferent, or the materialists, outside of all the heavens made by the masses, outside the Christian paradise and the Vedic labyrinth. This is a first great miracle of transmutation. An Italic school that recalls the integral abstractions of Pythagoras, with the values of numbers, abstractions of absolute values independent of any mystical form. Then the Master appears before you, above you, in you, and in front of you. It is the unknown Master, or the unknown spirit of Martinist Theosophy, and perhaps a little bit of the high masters of Tibet, of the fashionable neo-Buddhist Theosophy. The integral Hermetic Italic school must have the character of impersonality and of non-belief in the word of the teacher. I could tell you, like Irenaeus, that I know what I write, but I cannot tell you what things are, and not tell it to you simply so that you would believe, but rather I teach you the way so that you may attain the knowledge of it without the need to feel that which is unproven to you. Try to thoroughly penetrate the symbols hermetically. Chapter 9. The Law, Unity, and the Number 1. The emblem of ancient magism was the tailed star, just as the emblem of the evolved man was the five-pointed star. The star is the symbol of light upon the deep sky, where divinity and facts hide. The tailed star is not a celestial body in continuous view. It is the comet, suffice it to say a cyclical apparition of light that, as in the early ideas of peoples, has an influence on the things of the world. The fixed and luminous star, without a tail, is the completed evolution of the intelligent man integrated into his divine powers. Imagine the lights that are upon the deep background of the celestial vault, that you painted on a flat sheet, adding a very large disk to represent the sun, and a smaller disk for the moon, and you will have the conception of hieratic magism. It concerns a generating masculine force, luminous and hot in itself, the sun, symbol of all the active and continuous transforming force of creation, a womb, which receives the solar fecundation, and once impregnated and fecundated, gestates all that can be created, the moon. These two major celestial bodies, which represent the active and the passive of creation, are surrounded by numerous stars, and in each star you will see an evolved life. From here comes an entire religious symbolism, of which Christianity has incorporated the latest fragments. Like the symbol of the tailed star, compared to cycles, that is, to periods of evolution. The integral and integrating science makes its luminous appearance when the time comes to determine a renewal. This is a symbol. It is neither astronomy nor astrology. The hieratic conception of the forces of the universe is simple, and all mythologies had simple origins. A masculine god that acts upon a feminine god. The heroes or demigods, evolved men who have more or less divine blood in their veins, perform prodigious acts in the thicket of the human jungle. These very simple things have their given origin in abstruse philosophies. Those of you who delight in the Hebraic Kabbalah will find in literal algebra a special form of Hermeticism called Sophic, that is, of abstruse, Sibylline wisdom, where one reads and sees clearly that when one knows how to read, one is already a master of the art. Numbers, in a Pythagorean manner, reduce the symbolic exposition of these simple ideas to forms that are more intelligible for laypeople in abstruse matters. The law of the world is one, always equal and constant. An active principle fecundates a passive one that nourishes and increases the embryonic form of the first, then separates and makes it live with its own life. The man, the woman, the child. The sun, the moon, creation. 1, active, 2, passive equal to 1 plus 2 equal to 3. This is active plus passive, which gives life to a form that is the sum of the two. In everyday language, a common number is a concrete quantity, and the digit is its graphical representation. Conversely, in the exposition of these laws, the number is the virtue of the quantity represented by the digit. It is nothing more than the indication of the quality of the quantity. 1 is the virtue of the first principle and the first synthesis. If this integral philosophy is studied to its ultimate consequences, we will have clarified a principle of continuous and tedious controversy, whether a God exists or not, and what we must understand outside of every religion by this word, which theologies have denatured from its true meaning, unity in synthesis. 1 is the principle of the infinitely small and the infinitely large, two things that human conception cannot reach. It is the complex of all syntheses, or the total synthesis in itself. It is the numerical value of everything that exists. The universe is the unit of the synthesis of the created visible and invisible. 1 is the concept of the unique God. In synthesis, God is true because universal unity is true. To conceive the unity of existence is to conceive God. 1 is man, the unitary synthesis. 1 is humanity, the first total synthesis. The only law that governs man, humanity, and the universe is the intelligence of the unique God. Man walks toward the ultimate human synthesis. All sciences of investigation look toward the knowledge of the single law, toward the God that is the ultimate synthesis. Some sciences analyze the first synthesis man, others the second synthesis, the law of nature that obeys the single universal law. The science that studies man involuntarily seeks the monad of the first synthesis. Astronomy, whose foundation is mathematics, the absolute science of quantities, is the first tentacle that man extends to understand the greatest synthesis. The unit man is in the human mind. The unit God is in the universal mind. Until positive science finds a mathematically exact method of investigation of human mentality, it will not be able to attain the knowledge of the universal mind, or the mental unity of the great synthesis. The cell is in the atom, and the latter is in the initial monad of life. just as in the synthesis man and in the universal synthesis or God. Thus, the human mind is in the universal intelligence or mentality, just as the thought of the first monad is in the mind of man. Everything. The poverty of human language does not lend itself to expressing ideas that are not common to all men. Herein lies the need for the formula, and the easiest and most complete is the number. 1 is the mind. What is the mind? The totality of the thinking cause and effect. However, mind is movement. To understand what movement is, hermetically you must not conceive of it as a displacement from one place to another. Hermes should make you conceive of mental movement outside of all place, all surface, and all point. Otherwise you will have mechanized whatever lies outside mechanical law and belongs to pure mathematics. The mind one is movement in space. Space, in this most subtle philosophy of Hermes, is a mental environment. It has no dimensions and encompasses all dimensions. Quite the contrary, it becomes synonymous with a place for dimensions. Is it difficult? Mental space, or the environment of the mind synthesis, is beyond all arithmetical valuation. Thus, the functions of thought have no limit, and free movement can perceive and extend itself into the movement of the human mentality, and into the divine or universal synthesis. In what way? The universe one comprises the first and second synthesis, two extreme syntheses, the unity and sum of all syntheses. Man finds himself at the poorest extreme and can, by analyzing his mind or the movement of the mind in its dimensionless space, align with the universal mind movement, which must have the same space, and describe thoughts and knowledge. In fact, if the movement of your mind dispenses with the place and space in which the movement takes place, and is dimensionless, the human mind finds itself in the same sphere of explanation as the divine mind. Positive divinity or universal law. If the universal law is immutable and constant in the same space, then either the God descends to you or you ascend to him. Here is a corollary. Once the space of mental movement is conceived as dimensionless and movement outside of all place, time in the operations of the mind does not exist. The human mind, having hermetically penetrated this function, identifies with the timeless universal mind. It represents a divine virtue that transforms into miraculous powers, although they are not miracles to the vulgar, who are ignorant of the universal law. Chapter 10. The binary and the opposing forces. Having shown what the first number, or 1, means, which represents the great synthesis, ratified in the smaller synthesis, I must speak of the second number. It is the synthesis that acts upon the passive part of itself. The number 2, it is the first compensatory equilibrium of the great synthesis. Hence the hermaphroditic god of the very first mythologies, Osiris and Isis in the embrace of love, the male and the womb of forms in creation. It represents then the binary, passivity. If the universal absolute is unitary, all its sensible manifestations and the reflection of itself in the materialization of movement and space of mechanical reality, are under the generative impulse of the primal will. Man is 1, woman is 2, God is 1, matter or the devil is 2, good is 1, evil is 2. Thus light and shadow, summer and winter, day and night, wisdom and madness, pleasure and pain, strength and weakness, love and hate, justice and injustice. This is the truth in the absolute and in the relativity of times. You cannot conceive of light without shadow, its opposite, in the same way as pleasure without pain, strength without weakness. The value of active things emerges from their opposite. The two pillars of time are the eternal symbol of its two forces, active and passive, which govern everything that forms part of universal and particular life in each of us and our societies. Whoever dreams of an active or a passive without its opposite is a madman who denies the first law of the universe. Have you conceived, thought of hermetically, the mind-movement space without place, dimension, or time? If so, awaken to the reality of things and think of the mind within the limits of dimensions, in the necessity of boundaries, in the relativity of time, and return to matter, to chaos, to the primal womb, into whose universal will of the great synthesis its semen flows. Here we are in the realm of the vulgar, in the conception of the vulgar, where everything appears, grows, diminishes, and disappears. The thought of the God of absolute law is a hieratic concept. The Virgin, Mary, Isis, Astarte, Proserpina, and Minerva are the conception of the vulgar faith related to temporal grace and matter. Absolute, universe, creative freedom, relativity, nature, servitude. This is the law of the two creative factors. In the first term, absolute freedom exists. In the second, relative servitude. And this law is true, immutable, and inexorable with respect to all things, whether thought or enacted. You are free to perform the first action upon conceiving the first thought. As soon as thought and action are freely expelled from your being, you become slaves to your conception in act. It is the semen that falls into the womb of the world and generates the necessity of form. Thus the one appears with respect to the two as freedom of creation. One is in the necessity of experiencing it. Two, if it were not so, the universal unity would be sterile. Thus the absolute contains in itself, and by itself, the germ of its obstacle, of the limitation of its freedom, of the cause of its effective determinism. This is why, like the androgynous God, some sects defined the half-good and half-evil God as a half-god, half-devil. The androgynous God is a symbol of the law, man in the first physiological phase, hermaphroditic. In the contrast between virtual power and creation in act, the disharmony in the harmony of the two opposites. The number two is the valorization of the virtue of one. It is the womb of possible realization, and it is, as a womb, the necessity of passing from thought to the created form. In fact, an active unity is not conceivable by itself. To be active, a realm is necessary in which the virtue of the act is exercised. This realm is a passivity facing an active, consequently, it is a womb. Because invisible nature, as in the invisible, by homology, every action produces a reaction, but this reaction is not a passive by itself, but the consequence of an active upon a passive. From chemistry and physics to social life we can draw examples. Light illuminates. That which receives the action of light is shadow, that is to say, the negation of light. The result of this contrast is vision, the appearance of objects in the struggle between active and passive, between light and shadow. In this example, vision is three, the fruit of the action upon the passive element, and being three, it is one, because it contains the three terms of the first trinity or first trinitarian synthesis, the active, the womb, and the result. Osiris acts upon Isis. Horus is born. Three is the ternary, it is Mercury, it is the fruit, that which is generated by the first binary. An ancient initiate, in a song from the Neoplatonic period, to the voice that spoke to him about the truth, asked, "Who are you?" And it responded with a teaching of Pythagorean arithmetic, which could be translated thus, "I am in you for you. I am not you. You have prayed. In the form of prayer you have engaged the loving invisible. The fruit of your act is the voice that speaks to you. It is the mercury of your intellect." In fact, the first problem that presents itself to whoever is initiating into this integral science is that of asking their hermetic light, the source of which no man knows. Who are you that manifest yourself bringing me the truth? Some say, "It is I, my intellect." Some say it is an angel. Some say it is a demon or a god. If one does not understand the law expressed with such simplicity by the Kabbalah, one will never understand it, like the mystics inspired by religious forms of all kinds. Well then, that voice of an essentially hermetic nature must have responded, "I am not you, but I am not something foreign to you. I am in you for a reason of your own, and I am not in you. Behold the unknown wise master who draws near." Chapter 11. The Trinity and Human Synthesis. The elementary erudition of the occult sciences, Spiritism included, leads one to believe that man is formed by three differentiated parts, body, perispirit, and soul or spirit. But this vulgar belief is not Pythagorean, because, when analyzed in the enunciation of the first three terms of the law, it does not correspond to reality as logology. Why? Because the universe must, like man, be conceived as synthesis and unity. The infinitely great is synthesis, just like the small human synthesis. Every unity that is imagined to be divided into parts ceases to be such, unless a word is found that calls these parts not divisions but organic or essential components, a word not found today. If we are presented with a glass of water and told that it is oxygen and hydrogen, it is no longer water. Combined they are water, but water, divided into its composite elements, is no longer the liquid you must drink. I beg you not to consider this a matter of linguistic pedantry, but rather a determination of synthesis within the absolute values of the terms. Absolute philosophy cannot admit the conception of parts within unity. If I say that the universe is divided into an active, creative mind, a sensible reality, and a law of continuous course, I would not have expressed the unitary concept of the great synthesis in the enunciation. It is possible that in the universe the first, mind, manifests itself only through the second, reality, and through the third, law. Nevertheless, the three component parts of the unity synthesis are so interpenetrated with respect to one another that any division, even down to the monad, contains the three factors without ever separating them. Whoever wishes to understand the enunciation of the Trinity in the Catholic Christian religion must have understood the first three numbers of the Kabbalah, and any vulgarization, including those referring to the symbolic doctrines of parish priests, is a heresy against the Kabbalah that has presided over its enunciation. Byzantine diatribes, which tended toward the vulgarization of Kabbalistic truths in the most classical religion, forced them to become dogmas, statements of faith in apparently absurd things. To affirm that the Virgin conceived without the participation of a man is intelligible to a modern person who does not refer at all to the explanation of the law. The Trinity is the dogmatic manifestation of this law of divine manifestation in man, the active principle material man. The Holy Spirit is the manifest action of the universal intelligence, or minded man, the Son of God. So that, where the vulgar man bows to a dogma, or despises it, the Kabbalah, or Pythagorean arithmetic, finds the law, the absolute and ideal philosophy, which does not belong to Catholicism alone, but to all philosophical religions. But let us return to man. Spiritualists speak of three parts, improperly. The Church speaks of two, body and soul, one mortal part, another immortal. We say that, since the universe is infinite and there are infinitesimal monads, man must obey the same Trinitarian law of an active, a passive, and a protocol or result. It is the same law that governs every combination in chemistry. But obeying this law does not mean that man is divided into parts, much less that each element exists by itself. Remember this well so as not to fall into the anti-scientific vulgarization of the pure conception. Man is the resulting synthesis of an active, a passive, and a product, just as in the infinite universe, interpenetrated and establishing the law of being, of that which is entity or eon. We fulfill life in a unique way, in the mental realm. The mind, that is, intelligence in its human mechanism, cannot dispense with the sensible. If we think, it is because we feel, touch, see, taste, smell, or we have relative ideas. To say that the mind dispenses with sensations is contrary to the facts, not only because there is no thought that does not directly or indirectly refer to sensory memories, but also because it is experimentally demonstrated that in the phantoms of the living, sensitivity is transferred from the gross body to the subtle body. But between the mind and sensation there exists a discerning principle which is the absolute intellect, and the three synthetic elements are thus interpenetrated within that which, in divisional opening, can be found in the synthesis of water. This universal synthesis is the same everywhere, in every particle of man and of creation. Thus, the spiritualist affirmation must not be understood as a division, but as a unity and combination of the elements, an interpenetration that in no case should be understood as in chemistry. And, as I have told you previously, do not believe, O man, that you are soul and body, considered as one like the universe. Now that we have defined the universe in the essential triad of its explanation, I must tell you, like the universe, always considered as one in the Trinitarian law. A mental active, mind, spirit, a material form, an activity resulting from the factors, intermediate with respect to the two natures, material and mental, perispirit. The Christian soul is a body that turns to ashes. That is how it has been vulgarly thought, not responding to the law. Man cannot escape the Trinitarian law. As a consequence, death does not divide the physical body from an invisible and intelligent body, so the spirits of the dead do not exist. Therefore, the real evocation of the dead is not possible, not even on a mental level in the sense commonly believed. Chapter 12. The Great ART in Symbology. To understand these things, you will say, is balance, sobriety, or hermetic light required. But these are things that anyone, more or less versed in theosophy, can understand and break down to a certain extent. Yes, but they are not comprehended. To understand them as I understand them requires that other salts enter the head. Instead of holding voluminous disquisitions, you can and must find the law of the miracle to which you aspire. The miracle, by euphemism, that changes you, men, and transforms you into supermen, and that gives you the powers of the virtues. So in this I beg you to believe me. There is no conquest of the truth that does not confer with its exercise of power, whether over yourselves, over things, or over natures inferior to you. You must understand integration not arcanely, singing pastorals or philosophizing, but by conquering the right and the strength to make use of the truth, snatched from the secret heavens of nature. The saints of Christianity, the holy men of Islam, the perfect ones among the Indians have and have had these powers. This means that whatever is above Christians, Mohammedans, or Buddhists is common to all peoples of the earth, the law of integration. Our school should investigate with the method proper to the portable laboratory of the alchemists, above itself and within itself, outside of all relativities, myths, and altars. Where the Jesuit may see the hand of Stanislaus Kostka, and the priest the intervention of the miraculous painting of the Valley of Pompeii, you must intuit the law of the apparent miracle, of a phenomenon that the vulgarity of man cannot yet produce at will, and not the infraction of the laws of nature. It is the ars magna, the great art, the practice. It is the alchemy or superchemistry of the transmutations of beasts into gods. It is the precious ointment that turns the ass into a man who would want to don the wings of the eagle. It is the rose that restores the human and priestly countenance to the golden ass. This hermetic doctrine is completed by the ideography of magic rituals, things that, at first glance, seem stupid, but which your progress will make you see with a scrutinizing eye, to the point that in the name of the daemon you will see whatever secret is hidden and what foundation it has in practice. This is why mental cultivation helps decipher old, stale things in archaic form, for the sake of erudition and vast knowledge, through method and understanding, because one must distance oneself as much as possible from making foolish appraisals and considerations about it, for in the light of current knowledge, one cannot evaluate things that require a different preparation to be explained. In the Seal of Solomon, which now belongs to the realm of fables told to children, there is a magical hieroglyph that appears in churches, on the frontispieces of many Bibles, and, finally, in Masonic logos. Mocking those 6 ornamental lines is easy and justifiable for one who does not understand their meaning. However, if Hermes unveils its significance, you will understand why all the spirits of dark legends have always confessed the most sacred terror for a similar seal, which encloses in a steel vise all revealed demonic natures. In fact, whoever knows the practice and perfectly understands its use cannot be afraid of spirits and entities of any origin. I have often asked myself why erudite and highly intelligent people have viewed all the signs found in the works of Cornelius Agrippa as a compendium of utterly worthless idiocies. Even the things said by automatic writing mediums, which so often occur involuntarily and in a state of early hypnosis, under unconsciousness, regarding such signs as having no value at all. What if they had great value? But let us be carried away by Agrippa. He had too much of a reputation for uncertain faith, because, as the spiritist Allan Kardec would say today, he was made for sorrow. But the scholars who have read Trithemius's steganography have only stopped at the book's title, and have not paused to judge the work as an ordinary means to correspond with other confirmations in conventional language. Giovanni Tritemio, a Benedictine abbot, a most perfect master of natural magic, as reflected in the printing of the Darmstadt edition in 1621, and it has even been speculated that he was among the authors of modern telegraphic ciphers. They have not read him. Had they done so, they would have found 31 spirit ideograms, and nothing more and nothing less than the oath that the disciple must swear to the master to learn this art. An art through the hidden writing of the soul or the will to reveal with certainty to the absent, and also an incantation that the master must say before the disciple enters the secret of the art, conjuration, and which begins with these verses in an unknown language. Masari cosmenial archaea famorcritas tricomosarusio nos vesotureos. Was the most perfect master, and above all an abbot, also a madman or a charlatan, or a writer of little lies, whose key could not be obtained without swearing by the blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. For this reason, I desire a theoretical, unhurried teaching, stripped of all Hebraism, without prolonged philosophies, without empty criticism and chatter. This must be done before having practiced and understood from what point of view one must interpret things that, to us, bear an unknown meaning until we comprehend their significance. Are not the hieroglyphs on Egyptian columns merely curious drawings to children? Chapter 13. Isiac magic, Ammonic magic, and eons. First of all, I will make you understand something that you will seek in vain to understand in classical books, that the ancients knew and practiced 2 forms of magic, the eonic and the transmutatory, the first being Isiac or lunar, while the second was Ammonic or solar. To have an exact concept of the two forms of magic, it is necessary to understand what the sun and moon, Amon Alzabar and Isis Astarte, were meant to indicate. Amon, the solar god, is reflected thus in a magical incantation: "You are the beautiful and resplendent emperor on earth. You have the horns of the billy goat that gives milk to the sheep. You are the force that transforms sand into gold, hard stone into gem, and you transmute everything into ashes, men of gold and precious earth. You create the lightning bolt, and you dissipate the lightning bolt. You give water to the rivers and blood to the veins. You are the most mighty transmutator whom all goddesses love and fear." It is evident from this approximate translation that the active force of nature in all its active transmutations was Ammon, or the sun. Isis Astarte is described thus: "Beautiful, most beautiful goddess, golden womb that Ammon has kissed. From your innumerable breasts milk springs forth, and every drop of your milk is a mutation of grace. Your eyes are a fountain of light, because Ammon the victorious has calmed his fire." In the goddess resided the action of transmutation during the gestation period of its actual manifestation, which the womb of Isis Astarte, or the moon, took charge of. Thus, two forms of magic take the name of the two factors of realization: ammonia, the magic of the Caprine force, capable of imposing transmutation within the magician and without Isiac, that which utilizes forces as it finds them and for the ends they can serve. For now, it is impossible to think of the first, given that it is the magic of the very few who manage to live and become gods or noumena. It is the second magic, white or lunar magic, silvery and almost religious in form, with which we shall occupy ourselves at length and freely. Those of us who were triumphantly traversing all Aeonic magic will find the Ammonic initiator who awaits it. Why is lunar magic called Aeonic? Because realizations are made and obtained by means of the eons. Eons means beings or entities, visible or invisible entities. Every being that enters our active circle will be utilized for a beneficial act. These beings are not spirits of the deceased, which for us do not exist, but rather they are living spirits that our will of love calls forth. They are male, they are female, they are more or less evolved or highly evolved. They are capable of evolving toward perfection. I hope you do not believe that I want to lead you away from the truths, and that I am submerging myself in poetic symbolism, because eons are not hypotheses, but realities, and for better or worse, your Hermes makes you feel them. It is even possible that you may know one personally whose appearance is tangible and almost human. If the five of us gather and connect in a chain, forming a constellation of light around us, slowly at first, rapidly later, groups of eons will approach, attracted by humanity and our work, without asking whether it is better to be directed or compensated. Our Isiac work will progress and will benefit in numerous ways from the usefulness of their intervention. The school does its collective practice. They are forces, and they are intelligent. Through love they serve. Through hate they obstruct every path, and are implacable enemies of those who break and violate pacts. Imperfect compared to a man integrated in his powers, they are obedient to the magnetic rule of man. They are not angels because, in the form in which religion presents them to us, such do not exist. They are not devils as the mystics portray them. They are beings who, analogously to man, live in an environment into which only Hermes can permit entry to those who will prove faithful, and they are the only entities that accompany man and exist upon the earth, which is our grand theater. Higher still are the Ammonian intelligences, which perceive the synthesis of the world and, figuratively, are said to see God. All religions and all popular traditions that give us the certainty of not being earthly or, at least, of non-terrestrial origin, approach man and can contact him. Catholicism and Christian theologians especially are the ones who have occupied themselves with fervor, subtlety, and breadth in distinguishing them, classifying them, recognizing them as virtuous, and specializing them. God protect us from the explorers of the divine realm, especially when they had, as they have had, bailiffs and prisons for anyone who did not believe. The concept of intelligence, of spirit, of the eon, and of the genius, according to Kabbalistic and magical intuition, has nothing to do with the discussions of the saints about the constitution of the body of angels and the difference of these with respect to the body of demons. They are entangled in opinions, all holy, all good, all respectable, but which do not concern us. The conception of those special, extra-human, extraplanetary, nebulous, and mystical natures does not concern us, for now, other than as a curiosity. In the Palace of Enchantments by the Vicentian gentleman and theologian D.I. Strozzi Sicogna, one reads, It is a very complicated matter to attempt to discuss what angels are. Hence, by natural reasons we can know, one might say, nothing, and by the revealed science of the sacred scriptures, quite little. Therefore, the capable man must not be deterred by a sheer quantity of words. There has never been so much to say as what can be said about the unknown arguments regarding the direct science of man. But there is more. There is much to fight through, when there are legions of writers who have manipulated the subject in every sphere. St. Augustine says that the angel is a spirit of incorporeal, invisible, sensible, reasonable, intellectual, and immortal substance. If it makes you happy, try to understand St. Augustine. The patrician prefect continues thus: the Academy of the Platonists resolved that the order of all these substances and that these spirits should have a body, except the first creature created by God. This seems to have been followed by many theologians of the Holy Church, such as Origen, who affirmed that it was impossible for anything to live without a body except the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and in another place, he says that angels have a soul in the manner of men. Tertullian himself confirms this in the book On the Flesh of Christ, and they claim to draw this from the sacred scripture in that passage. Upon seeing the daughters of men, that they were fair, the sons of God took for themselves wives of all that they chose. I pardon them all. All sorts of things have been said, and among influential saints and holy theologians the disagreements have been infinite. From the incorporeal spirit of Augustine, one arrives at the angel who takes his mother-in-law as a wife. About Lucifer, what has not been written? He was the most beautiful angel and the first created by God, the prince of the angels, the conception of this most perfect angel who rebels out of pride, and whom Isaiah portrays speaking of his ambition for the place of his Creator. Is it not perhaps elusive to man's conquest of the kingdom of heaven and divine powers? And the battle that is waged in heaven to cast Lucifer down to the earth, so that he assumes the form of a tempting serpent? How did you fall from heaven, Lucifer? How did you lose the battle, O most beautiful among all the angels? Now the concept of redemption is a logical epilogue to the entire doctrine of the fall. Man falls, and an angel falls who is the first of those created. The aspiration is upward. The fallen want reconquest. It is a social question of the souls that ascend and aspire to the heavens and to God. In the elements of natural and divine magic, in the secret world, I express myself with unusual clarity regarding the problem of the aspiration to divinity. Whoever has been able to understand me has understood me perfectly. Intelligences are faces of divinity. The Neoplatonists did not dictate any other interpretation of the word angel. Simple things are such by nature, and only the sophistry of the ignorant manages to denature them. But as it was published, they are elements of magic in its grandeur and magnificence, in its action upon us, as individuals, and upon humanity. In the preparation, I will try to define the conceptions of gods, demons, and men. The grave, the frivolous, and the evanescent. The daemons, eons, of Apuleius, which Plato repeats, are considered to be of a more subtle and less dense matter than clouds. They are not, like clouds, composed of impure matter. They are of a strange, brilliant, and subtle matter, which cannot be seen by our eyes due to its transparency. These gods are susceptible to pity, anger, and sadness, and they experience their own feelings in the spirit of man. Thus they are exposed to all the hurricanes and tumults of the thoughts in which our heart and our spirit are agitated. The gods, O intelligence, perpetually maintain the same state of spirit. Pain and pleasure have no place in the being, and it is never moved by any external reason. The God of the heavens must not fulfill any temporal function, whether by rendering aid or suffering afflictions, just as he feels neither anger nor pity, nor is he agitated by sadness or joy. He has no desire or affection for anything. In the nature of the daemons, eons converge all human passions. To define it exactly, continues Apuleius, one can say that daemons are animate beings, reasonable in spirit, but with a passive soul, an aerial body, and eternal duration. Reasonably animated and passive like men, they have the formation of their body as a special trait. They are eternal like the gods, but they differ from the gods by their passions. The soul of man, while it is in the body, can be called a daemon or a god, although demons are those who were never bound to material bodies and who have more extensive powers, among which sleep and love have two opposite faculties, love that of awakening, and sleep that of stimulating. With such a numerous army of sublime genii, Plato claims that each man has his own, the sovereign arbiter of his conduct, an ever invisible and assiduous witness to his thoughts. Nothing happens, neither inside nor outside of you, that the genius does not see or feel even in the most hidden depth of your heart. The angel of the Christian conception is the divine intelligence in the very same eternal state of spirit. They are angels. They are placed and commanded. They are the face of a unique God and of the Trinitarian law. Unique. Therefore, they are not eons, genii, or demons. Chapter 14. Individual ascent and planetary genii. From the base one goes toward the heights, like the flame. From the guardian angel, which is the tutelary genius, to the immense God, to the knowledge of the law, one passes, one proceeds, and one emerges. The golden staircase continues and interlocks. Michael, Uriel, Luciferus, the purest conception of the celestial Myriam, around whose head sparkle the 12 luminous stars of the zodiac. We do not fit. We do not leave the earth immature. I speak of an integrating school of man, and I do not address the concept in the splendid plane of the great religious and collective magic, like that in which the image of Christ shines, splendid and intensely purifying, who, sacrificing himself in an act of sublime charity, transmutes an entire epoch into a better one. I speak of an individual ascent and renewal outside of mysticism, in rational life, in which our Hermes can reach the most perfect typical genius, which fills us with true love, and leads us to perfection in the law that no one can violate, and that only theological madness conceives as violated in the miracle, attributing it to the one God, who is law, and beyond, nothing more than matter, spirit of matter, and spirits of the living. Look at the starry sky. How many worlds, how many earths, and what beings there might also be in them, of analogically constituted matter like us, is not a simple suspicion. If it is possible for a phantom to live on the earth, is it not possible for phantoms to live higher up? When you have intuited the Pythagorean formula of dimensionless space and the movement of space, you will not be able to imagine the amount of possible fantasies about more complete organisms that can project their own phantoms millions of thousands of miles away and influence terrestrial affairs. You will say that, wanting to found an integral school with positive principles, I am beginning to travel in the clouds. No. I simply want to remind you that perhaps the planetary and interplanetary genii, which the prolonged practice of the ancient Ammonian magic has transmitted to us, are neither symbols nor poetry. Perhaps Sirius and Jupiter cannot dispose of those who, being summoned, become beloved companions down here. We are in the clouds, but not navigating them. Camille Flammarion has reserved that function for himself. I take a step forward. Chapter 15. Death as the transformation of matter. The problem of death remains. Rome, O my amiable companions, is full of eyes. Ius Lacutius, says Cicero, spoke until he was recognized as a god. Then he fell silent. Now Lacutius already has his statue in Rome, disturbing the poetry of extreme spiritualism, even assuming morbid forms of propaganda. It is somewhat inconvenient. Buddha, Christ, and Muhammad did not agree on the destiny of this great presumptuous insect of the earth called Homo sapiens. The marvelous thing is that if one were to lay out the conclusions before the science of magical integration, they would be found more out of harmony with the others. Death exists only as a scarecrow for the living. Matter is always alive. Spirit and inspiration, it is the flame that chemically transmutes heavy matter into ethereal matter. In the word spiritus is the root of pyr, which is the blazing fire that burns, and of which Uriel is the transforming angel of the flame of love. In the matter that combines at its base, the angel presides over the mutation of state and the transfusion of forms and virtues. In a more intensely understood superchemistry, love is death, just as death is the integrative love of new forms, more precise, more yielded to the needs of the Creator, in the self-creation of the just and new humanization. Thus the spiritualists are right, if, for a continuous, effective, and realizing elaboration, our etherized matter is a unitary intelligence that forms what is commonly called the soul, it must also be of immortal matter in its ethereal and thinking unity. The integration of the occult virtues of the human organism must allow us a state of lucid consciousness, to face this terrifying symbol of the disintegration of the heaviest matter already exploited in the work of a lifetime. The present cowardice is entirely Christian, typical of the false Christianity that has remained in the masses and the incredulous scholars of hell, based on roasting pits and the idle and empty paradise, where life is impossible because there is neither love nor death, nor delirium of pleasure, without human spasms or tribulations. The ancient pre-Christians must have feared less this hour of mutation, in which one mask is abandoned to adopt a new one. Today, the desperate commit suicide in the dementia of hopelessness. Yesterday, courageous men, philosophers, and illustrious poets joyfully committed suicide. However, we are in decline when we try to embolden ourselves with the lies of Spiritism by telling ourselves that we are going to enjoy a life with more freedom of thought, movement, and power. Blessed be the Holy Word. We have needed it. After having desired a paradise without an accurate topography, we lukewarmly allow ourselves the illusion of believing in a paradox, that without the terrestrial human body we can continue thinking, loving, suffering, traveling without aircraft or railway, fares across seas and continents. Blessed are those who believe. To take courage, it would be enough to think that when the hour has come, when the coal has run out in the perfected carcass that is in large part ourselves, dying is so simple that all creatures of the earth do it without protest. Plants, animals, and minerals die. Millions of men die every hour. Why should we be afraid of something that is so simple and announces the simple fulfillment of a law, the only law that makes us all equal? I do not ask myself this. There are hidden imperfections within us, an unconscious premonition that the period following the sleep of death is more fearsome than frigid and rheumatic old age. Is it the fear of a disintegration of the ethereal core of what is called the immortal soul? Official science does not answer, badly and in disharmony, religion's answer. Hence the need for a spiritist creed. Integrating himself into the latent powers, he who sees within himself, sees into the kingdom of men. The grain bears fruit and dies. The seed of the grain is the soul that is the object of resurrection, and as soon as the dew of a spring dawn kisses the earth in which it is hidden, it germinates. Everything returns this way. The roses and violets return. The luminous or twinkling stars return on the horizon, returning to the men who have kept their ethereal unity intact. The damaged grains fall apart, as do the roses without pollen, the violets devoured by worms and beetles. Chapter 16. Reincarnation and integration of powers. The Christian says, I believe in the resurrection of the dead. However, the Church believes it only for the time of the universal judgment. Who knows when this judgment prophesied by melancholic and apocalyptic madness will take place? The common people, the poor, patient, and hard-working common people, who pay taxes and drink the wine of Barletta, must be unaware of the date of the judgment that will make them return among flaming leaders of classical Enotria. But we must not. Those who assume the abrupt mission of leading the masses to the conquest of human and civil consciousness must not know it. This integrating science reveals to the mob the secret of the Egyptian mummies. The self-formation of intelligent humanity is a mystery and an arcanum for the priests of a great sect, not for the adepts of a school. Your formation, O cowardly and proud worm of the earth, homo of humus, is the gradual work of your lives. Die and return if you are the seed of the golden grain and not moth-eaten, ready and sensitive to the roar of spring, which is a kiss of love from nature. Die, and do not return if your ethereal soul is as foul-smelling as the mud of your corporeal matter. In the first case you ascend, in the second you descend. Turn into an angel and become an angel in a human body, bestialize yourself, and return to being a worm. Reincarnation is an inexorable law, just like death. It hides millions of men in an hour, just as they die. The clouds dissipate, the stars, which are luminous cores, reappear on the horizon, priestly initiatives prepare and forge human ethereal cores. The school attempts this today. The integration of powers is subordinated to the state of consciousness, which aspires to Ammonian power. The consciousness of the rooster makes the hen exert herself over the egg, in which lies the germ, where the creation of the chicken that perpetuates the species is hidden, in that which an act of love has ratified. This is physics, not metaphysics. Metaphysics is a lagoon of words, and of the spirits of words. It is the Isiac swamp, where the inventions of spiritual biology create and harm, within a single body, the larvae of sophic psychopathies. The universe is God and God is the law. The great architect of the universe is a mathematical formula, which is not derived through the equilibrium of cerebral matter. The origin and evolution of the species, even in the realm of observation, should be examined through the results of this formula. Only human vanity has wished to make us believe that the mathematics of this Masonic or builder God do not concern us as thinking beings. The vanity of false philosophers has done the rest, licking the feet of the doctrinaire vanity of the masses. The history of human sorrows takes its root in this immense vanity of the proud lineage, which aspires to the knowledge of divine powers, stepping over the barrier of the absolute and unique law. The Adonic type is the vulgar man, who deifies himself beyond and despite the law, who admires his own image to project it into the heavens. In the place of God, he is the Antichrist of the Christ, a son of the law who, as a man, felt a laceration of blood. Chapter 17. The subjective method of investigation. Death and rebirth. Decomposition and reincarnation. A means of transmutation, the identical urial present in the chemical combinations of laboratories, in the formation of crystals, in the falling of pollen from the anthers, in the sovereign perturbation of the billy goat by a flock of sheep, to the love of men, to the grandiose crises of the elements that destroy and vivify. I have said that integration requires all your mental and corporeal equilibrium. Dear friends, my first words are bearers of a little pity. But if they did not become ruthlessly balanced, certain positive integral problems, which dispense with all the morbid forms of earthly passions, would be impossible to confront. Death and reincarnation are, within this small number of questions, the vulgarity of temporal sentiments that writhe for the benefit of the petty deities with which the intellectual and investigative sphere of every human creature is sown. The value of contemporary studies and their seemingly simplest problems, physiological sleep and hypnotic states, for example, is minimal regarding the objectivity or non-subjectivity of experiences. A meager dressing to the enormous quantities of monstrous nonsense, noted because the mysticism of science is a product of vanity and not of the neutrality of the human observer. It is possible that for an integrating school, every scientific problem must encounter not only the one who exercises science, but the priest immune to the vain currents of humanity, who expresses suspicion toward the abjurations of theories accepted, cherished, desired, or adorned by the proud desires and passions of man. Do you wish to know the post-mortem, and have you not asked yourselves at night, in bed, already tired, whether death is like that sleep you know to be transitory in an uncertain way because you might not wake up again, and, once awake, what you lived as conscious life 8 hours earlier is certain for you. However, 8 hours are a gap in your consciousness as an awake man. The same goes for death. Upon being reborn, you know what you left interrupted or completed before rebirth. Why the oblivion? Have you asked yourselves the same question in the morning upon waking up between the sheets of your bed? It is not the oblivion during the 8 hours of sleep that will make you disown your human work from 8 hours earlier. Just as, living and as an adult, you do not remember the day on which you were nursed by your mother's turgid breast, yet you know it, and you know that you suckled milk and life. Between religious vainglory and the no less glorious mysticism of a science exercised in public and for the public, must your integration strip itself of all co-participation in the faith of the two mystical forms, deprived and withdrawn from them. Hieratic and scholastic authority to examine the enemies of your inner history. Mine does not seem like an irreverence toward the Spiritists and the men of valor who prepare the current generations for more civilized states, but rather the door of magic smaller than the 72 famous Kabbalistic goddesses. This is the method of subjectivity, without an enormous effort of debilitating preparation that we set in motion along the path of the asylum of wisdom by authority, with smoking censers to this or that decorated Superman. Spiritists, especially, do not take my sermons as a joke, because I teach not to believe in mediums through this door, in mediumship, in the phenomenal psychopathies of communications from beyond the grave, in the pathological and hysterical epileptic or epileptoid states of all the poor wretches who fall into a trance to make chairs and small tables dance, just as I teach not to believe in dogmas of any kind. Not to believe even in what I say or preach, except after self-experience, after the subjective method of investigation has become the foundation of serene and concrete judgment. It is useful that Allan Kardec and his followers appear because one comes to consider the study of special organisms in the production of physical phenomena like Palladino, Miller, Politi, and so many others, general neuropathic or pathological forms that border the realm of the marvelous. But the truth lies in the investigation that an allegedly positive school must fulfill in and of itself, which each disciple or brother must digest, from their normal consciousness, to the profound states of vulgar unconsciousness, in which the archive of our past existences, near, very close, and distant, is recovered, and the problem of death and resurrection through rebirth is studied like this. Chapter 18. Destiny, Karma, and Atavism. All men are equal before the law. The human judge, who applies to kings the penalties sanctioned by common law, has given rise to the thought of the judge God, who is the law God, who had codified the maxims of intelligible and universal wisdom, just so, like Napoleon and the French Code. Hence a whole series of empirical practices of piety to captivate the benevolence of this supreme judge who places Torquemada and Michelangelo in the same conditions upon the bench of justice, and who finds the former rewardable for his Christian zeal, and the latter barely forgivable for having completed Peter's Basilica. In the profane realm, even more so, equal rights between an idiot and a masterful intelligence, the errors of classes in the teaching of sciences, in the granting of academic degrees, in the recognition of acquired rights. Man does not admit, as a maxim, that an equal of his can or should have rights superior to his own, and, socially, those who emerge from the same masses are struck by the multiform manifestation of envy. It is a logical consequence of egolatrous tendencies, with which all of its components feel satisfied. Human laws put a brake on the violence that the vengeance of the unsuccessful against the fortunate few would entail. The informing concept from which this sentiment flows is false, because men are not equal among themselves, neither by the history of each of the many souls, nor by the abnormality of terrestrial organisms. Before the unique law, intelligent and mechanical, which is represented by the merciful universe, we are equal in the sense that each soul has its weight according to its specific right. And one of the greatest modern conquests of positive science is pointing out this new way of understanding moral inferiority in petty criminality, in which the morbid state is determined by the inadequacy of souls to perceive a higher and broader moral world. The premise of the non-equality of souls justifies the slavery of human groups compared to more advanced groups. Is mine a paradox that justifies intellectual castes? I will not continue, so as not to be lynched by the representatives of popularity based on the equality of rights and duties, the 8-hour workday, and the right to a day of rest, and without transcending from the serenity of discussing a thesis of the integrating soul, in the application of the absolute theory of mental values, and a social reform that is impossible as long as the priests of all religions, secular or mystical, remain a necessary plague of vulgar society, in whose bestial action the shrewdest men go to reap their proselytizing shares for the convenience of the moment. Let us reserve ourselves for now to the abstract realm of universal law regarding the souls that envelop it, and as long as we can do no more than preach the non-equality of the rights of each of us in the face of the problem of death, we set about singing the hymn of the sovereignty of the vulgar masses over the souls evolved by sentiment and sensuality. From anemic inequality, the mutability of destiny, the malleable destiny of the pagans and the initiates of today, like a fashionable barbarism, is called karma. The letter K is neither Latin nor Italian. This word is explained in the West with a work of analysis typical of Eastern psychology. The Latin synthesis made destiny an allegorical god, son of chaos and night, and in the vast and comprehensive mind of the mythologist, it offered the appearance of the fatality of human lives and victories, the corollary of a proven theorem. It is true that it does not exceed the limits of the demonstration that precedes it. Every life, like every event, has its unappealable epilogue, because every life, like every event, is a theorem that presents itself under the guise of a novel, and beyond a life of resurrection, it is an epilogue. The inviolable word in this, our existence, is fatum. One cannot transgress what we were before. From ferus, to speak or pronounce, fatum is the expressed word that no god has the authority to forbid. The omnipotence of any Numen, of any religious heaven, is powerless before the elimination of the past. The future is created or modified. The past was and is, in all its consequences, ineluctable. A god can make you forget what you have completed, but he cannot modify, destroy, or make as though it had not occurred the action that you completed yesterday. In the Western mind, the Latin or Greek soul understands the unfolding of the end of a life lived with a specific character of events prepared in the darkness of an existence unknown in the present. Destiny is like a character, a seal that no one could scratch away or destroy. Conversely, karma descends from the synthetic character to the examination and reaction to what has been completed, tooth for tooth, hair for hair, thought for thought, and it does not leave free will a single minute of rest and peace. Until the film, I can find no other word, unspools completely, and it establishes a balance sheet noting down the debts. It is a martyrdom undesirable, even for someone who has strangled our radiantly healthy sun. It is a concept of persecution that strongly resembles the eternity of punishment in the theologian's primary image of hell. The payment is fulfilled, spasm by spasm, smile by smile, wound by wound. And what is more, the free man who elevates, purifies, and improves himself, every time he pays, a new and profound stigma is reproduced in the dark and mysterious chamber of his soul, waiting to repeat as a creditor what he has today proven to return. A model of a self-winding watch, this psychology finds no understanding in us, to the point that of our ascension, in a will to efficacy, we make this an indisputable axiom. Destiny is more prolonged, more logical, and more comprehensible, even before the candle of vulgar reason which translates it as atavism. When atavism means psychic heredity and the heredity of the constituent physical elements of the Saturnian and heavy body of the living man, of the generative heredity. A soul that discarnates, being ethereal, preserves the sublimated elements of the physical body it leaves behind, and psychically preserves the latent memory of all the events that have unfolded under its bodily senses. If a process of reincarnation is possible, its reincarnation is determined by the greater affinity and sympathy of the psychic and physical characters of the false parents who were chosen, or whom it was forced to choose. Certainly relatives are preferred, and among relatives, those who most resemble each other physically. Atavism, psychic and morbid heredity, signifies a predestination of the newborn toward an end and an evolution of life that has a determined character. Psychological and constitutive atavism is already a destiny in the embryo. However, the newborn child is constrained by the narrowness of education and the unconscious imitation of the first years of childhood. During puberty, in the first crises of undefined love, his historical being begins to reappear, and the adaptation to the new environment becomes total if by his nature he is passive to suggestion, or partial if his hidden individual is half rebellious, or there is no possible adaptation if his historical soul finds itself in absolute contradiction with the factors of the new life. His destiny, in the first case, is largely determined by history and the atavistic character, in the second, by atavism, as it is now understood, and by the most characteristic memory of his preceding existence, in the third, by the hidden personality that clearly delineates the new life. It is clear that in each of the three cases anything or everything that will happen to him is ineluctable. This is destiny, understood in the Latin sense, in its comprehensive simplicity. The egg has its destiny in hatching the chick, if it is fertile. The thief of yesterday will not keep wine today as if it were a poison. The murderer will not be a man of peace and will not take long to find someone who remembers his ferocity. Whether the sidereal or meteorological influence that determined his conception in the womb of a woman will contribute to all this, or whether the specific character of the climatology of one region or another will be added, is a matter that can be discussed and examined, to see whether the so-called astrological tall tales have a positive value or not. Now karma, with a K, is none of this. It is the hidden mainspring of a living and automatic watch, of which the human body marks the hours. The command given to a sensitive in a deep state of hypnosis forces him, once awake, to eat a bowl of lupins. This command, in the process of being fulfilled, is the karma of the awakened subject. If this identical case happens to a man who dies with the intense desire to want to eat lupins, upon complete rebirth he will not desire to eat them. Chapter 19. The freedom of the soul and sacred philology. Thus, it is only possible to still retain an iota of respect for man, regarding his psychic freedom. Otherwise, humanity would have mutated into a society of sleepwalkers who eternally expiate and repeat their faults without the possibility of escape. Only in this way is it possible for a school to indicate, to contemporaries limited to religious battles and investigations of the psyche, a door on earth that introduces them into the realm of the mysteries of souls in order to ascend toward the heavens. If there is no relative freedom from yourself, you cannot dare, you cannot will. You cannot keep silent. To dare, to will, and to keep silent are three indications of the freedom of souls. There is a science still hidden in the mid-20th century, because it is difficult for the many men who study thousands of sciences, more or less positive, to return to the simplicity of simple ideas. Thus I wish, for all those attempting to cross this rope over the labyrinth, to reduce all things to reasonable proportions and not to believe in the diatribes and inventions of the supermen who surface in droves. With this method of simple ideas, kindly simple, understood with simplicity, all religious mysteries, all the mythologies that have been unveiled to us, and the Minotaur of confusion are immolated. Read the names of the mystic gods, see their origins, and you will acquire intimate knowledge of them, and there you will sketch, from the clouds of the theogonies that have blossomed in the realm of the objective from your intelligent vision, Osiris, Isis, Amun, Horus, Jupiter, Mizraim, Phoebus, Moloch, Adonai, Achad, and then Mary, and later Christ, Son of God, just so, like the kings of Syria who were called Ben-Achad or Ben-Hadad, sons of the Lord, the one God, then Baal-Hekate, Hera, Asherah, Astaroth, Adirtagash, a face, certainly of a woman, all the rest of the body a fish, a woman beautiful in her upper half ends in a fish, from which comes the net that the Cretans placed in the hands of Isis, either to indicate the destiny that encompasses men, or the moon that governs the generation of the sea, Artemis, a woman who foretells the future. Since, my friends, the mysteries are found in sacred words like roses among thorns, or to understand it, investigating and penetrating the hidden meaning of words is not merely the heritage of vulgar philology, but of a certain dose of the salt of Hermetic wisdom that grants the classic meaning to ancient sacerdotal speech. Virgo is translated as virgin, and if I say that the Latin and sacerdotal word virgo served as virigens, the schoolmasters would jump all over me. Virigens, the giantized man or the realizing man, cannot have any satisfactory, new meaning that opens the minds of grammarians. But I who know it, I who know, as you will know tomorrow, that the realizing or acting man is the form or symbol of Isiac magic, can no longer be made to rebel against pedagogical mockery. Mary is a virgin, Virgo potens, like Isis, that is, the type of man who acts with power. The woman, the feminine image, most sweet and radiant, is Virgo, insofar as it determines the potentiality of the agent. The sacred fire was kept burning by the virgin Vestals, and it had to be preserved as such, otherwise the fire would go out. Rhea, the common mother of gods and men, was a virgin, Phrygian Cybele, full of breasts like Astarte, in Latium, gives her name to the mystic virgin Vestal who gave birth to the twins Romulus and Remus, the binary, and was buried alive because she had to disappear into the vegetative earth of the city. And one could print a library on this sacred philology that no one would understand, if they were not first indoctrinated in the practice of divine powers, in the Hermetic Olympus, and they would contribute only by creating puzzles and riddles that would make the conservative critics of vulgar wisdom scream. But I insist. Studying the words that belong to dead religions is a benefit for those who only risk themselves halfway. It is not necessary to delude oneself that today more is known than what the ancients knew in the science of the human soul. They were profound and wise in a way that the science of modern universities will not be for many centuries. To integrate oneself is to understand the strength and virtuality of one's own soul and subjective knowledge. The veil of symbolic religions is lifted, and treasures are discovered that went unnoticed, like many good rags, like no others, which surface in the poetry of the strange evokers of ruined eras. Chapter 20. Rationalism versus mediumship. The small group of table companions of Villa de la Esperanza grows closer in amicable and fraternal meetings and many brief lectures, without the order or prejudice of establishing a philosophical method. I followed the foundations of a new scientific philosophy, which you will not all know how to repeat. If I were to repeat it, you could understand it well, without the knowledge, vast or otherwise, of the doctrines or pseudo-doctrines of contemporary psychology and animism. Around the five of us, many others, brothers of an intellectual brotherhood, gather, and the core has already become a small legion of practitioners and intellectuals anxious to think and progress by following a clearly traditional and magical method and direction. Hence the need to publish a little book that, regarding the complex subject, speaks plainly and exposes without reproach, without delirium, and without dogmatizing, what it is that differentiates us from the rest, feeling the greatest possible respect for the rest, because all the schools that tackle these profound problems of the soul have admirable thinkers and writers, researchers who, while they may diverge from our conclusions, bring to science, in its abstract entity, the contribution of their investigations. In France, England, and America, as in our own Italy, writers and scholars of occultism are already counted by the hundreds in the most diverse forms, from mysticism to theosophy, from societies of experimental psychism to the small gatherings of skeptics around mediums in a position to produce phenomena. Especially in France, there has been a flourishing, over the last 20 years, of an entire library, almost mystical, of many small religions and schools that have made possible a little book like this among us, who, by history and religious practice, are somewhat less enthusiastic about creating new churches. Nevertheless, the attempt at a clearly Italian school, in the good italic sense, seems possible to us now that the whole world does not view us as frauds in the assessments of spiritist practices, and whether or not those that manifest themselves under spectacles and narcotics are spirits of the living or of the dead. Popularly, it is understood that things of such a nature disconcert restful souls, aspiring to the repose of ready-made ideas. It is enough to put out the poster for a comedy to divide the public between the indulgent and the devastating critics. Apply this to a moment like this, in which a school is announced, however small and embarking, if the slings are not armed with ink and arguments to bury us under a pile of more or less philosophical projectiles. May Mars protect us. May he let us act, because our premises, if false, will yield negative results, and we will declare the tribunal of psychic opinion a failure. But they will let us act, because, as I have said, we are tolerant to the point of implausibility, and we expect a roughly similar treatment from all those who are already convinced by the opinions preached. If tomorrow an elegant man comes to tell us, "I am convinced that you are fools because you do not believe in the communication of the living with the dead. You do not believe in the immortality of the soul. You do not believe in the corporeal doubling of the human body," we will answer only, "Admirable friend and patron, you have not understood us. We are a rationalist school that tackles spiritual problems. We are not mystics. Our creed is the exposition of concrete ideas that respond to an effective general method. We will be told that communication with the spirits of the dead is certain. We will ask them whether you, precisely you, literally you, have communication with spirits without intermediaries and so-called mediums. You will say yes, we will believe you, and we will also try to communicate and reach an understanding with the intelligent units that have lived our life. Without ringing the bells in celebration, we will say, Mr. So-and-so has the illustrious gift of entering into conversation with the deceased. He is an exception, like unforeseen comets, but man in general does not communicate with the dead, unless we want to call as such the reincarnated spirits who in their deep consciousness remember their old personality. And we will say why a mental life is not possible in the absence of any more materialized body, organized by a movement of nutrition and renewal, and why mental evocations and plastic projections of the forms of the deceased, even if they were true, prove nothing about the life of the disincarnated, and that when the spirit of a dead person truly appears, it is already linked to an animal and earthly life, and hence a true case of the corporeal doubling of a living man. We will say many things, but we will not create either a law or a dogma. We will not say, the spirits of the dead ordinarily speak with the living through the mediation of a sensitive in a trance. On the contrary, we will say something more. On the rare occasions when a spiritualist meeting manages to be intelligent, in which an intelligence superior to the average normality of the attendees manifests itself, it is eons, genii, or demons that intervene in the writing. However, we believe in the immortality of the soul insofar as it reincarnates, as well as in the doubling of the body, but only in those who have a second body capable of feeling itself separate from or united to a Saturnian animal body. We will not disrespect anyone, and much less someone who would want to transform us into mystics, in the vulgar sense of the word, and have us adopt a faith in the incredible without scientific reason, because I, who have taken on the serious task of synthesizing these school criteria, teach and expect that, until a proof certain in and of itself is provided, no one affiliated with this integrating school should believe or certify axioms and postulates of axioms read in books. I have said, Do not believe in the church that considers us to be formed of soul and body. Do not believe in the spirits that want a body, a perispirit, or a spirit. Do not believe the theosophists who want us divided into 7 parts. I have said, integrate the consciousness and occult powers within yourself and learn what you are. I will say more. Due to the unitary order of the universe, we should and could be 2, 3, and 7 parts in a unity. If we were to become, in our self-creation, 2, 3, 5, and 7, but to go from this to saying that we are, that man is like this or like that, would be the same as saying that all mammals have horns just because the ox and the goat have them. That matter of corporeal doubling is neither an absurdity nor something that all men can or should obtain. To obtain it, they would need a second sidereal or lunar body to exist by itself, beautiful and formed in all men. But this is not so. The trinitary law exists, the quaternary of the elements, the quinary of the spirit element, but every cell, every molecule, every atom of the human body possesses the factors. Before the law of possibility becomes a realized possible, a fact, we need many tons of Milanese risotto to get there. They say that the priestly magical schools had or possessed abbreviated methods for this sidereal body to constitute itself rapidly. If I were to say that I know this method, I would have to ask for protection from the State Patent Office for its monopoly to prove it. So I limit myself to suspecting that this means or method can and must still exist today, if the ancients knew it. In the astral, everything that was is preserved, is evocable, and realizable. If the magical secret was known, this secret can be evoked and integrated again, and the merit will belong to the school that achieves it. Chapter 21. Hermetic Medicine and Thaumaturgy. I have no ulterior motive. I want many people, who flee from these studies as if they were nonsense, to be convinced by practice, which can achieve anything, and I repeat, as at the beginning, if, in the Italian manner, we reduce things to their intelligible and fair proportions, neither mystics nor incredulous. Secretly, I have but one desire, to prove that the possible conquests of studies and practices aimed at integration can have a useful verification in all the contingencies of life and can produce and extend good in all its forms to ourselves and to others. In America, the production of books of this genre is on the rise, because everyone believes they will turn the secret laws into dollars, and that the authors of the books that promise to give the great secret for daily success have found a gold mine. But this is an industry not permitted in Italy, land of poets and troubadours, who know how the chameleon and writings live on air. Much less have those who occupy themselves with such things needed money, because they always have ready a little gunpowder from projectiles, to transform the iron bars of gardens into golden rods. Therefore, our school wants to avoid the first obstacles, and it must ask for nothing that sounds like money, and every application of your forces must be oriented toward resolving in practice what the universities of the kingdom cannot yet propose. Is it possible to direct the latent forces of an organism which is reintegrating itself into the therapy of human diseases? Could that force, which in the Eusapias and the Politis made phantoms appear or a mandolin play, become a providential agent to alleviate pain? How far can the thaumaturgical power radiating this beneficial force reach? Can it substitute laboratory medication? Can it assist it? Can it obtain what no pharmaceutical obtains? Here is the only snake I kept in the bag, and I take it out. I grab the umbrella so that a hailstorm of insults from the clinicians of the Italian universities does not kill me, and, under the shield, I hope that the Integral and Hermetic School can create or propitiate a timeless attempt at a miracle for the health of the people. And I will make you understand briefly. From integration everything can be obtained, good and evil. However, it is known that those who dedicated themselves to good practices did nothing but good. It is logical. Having achieved intellectual and psychic progress, one cannot conceive of evil. One would not know how to practice evil, which is a restrictive conception of nature and a superficial physiognomy of the universe. For that reason, the traditionalist Rosicrucians were practitioners of thaumaturgy and thaumaturgists, who were all great initiates in the sacred sciences. A school of integration is not possible without a goal of realization, and the goal, a goal of noble civil charity, and to which they make the occult forces, which integrate within us, converge with the aim of alleviating human suffering. Alleviating human suffering does not mean resurrecting the dead, much less prolonging the life of an organized body beyond the limits permitted by the vital forces of each individual organism. The man who applies himself to the practice of science must believe in what is possible, not in what is illogical. Otherwise, he does not become a Superman, but an asylum inmate. The Rosicrucians were types of Christian Hermeticists, whose nebulous Teutonic legends have not distorted the Kabbalistic concept. Rosenkreutz does not present us with nonsense in the practice of the rose and the cross, nor the empirical lies about such characters that affect us. Much less do the mystics who play at being Rosicrucians to astonish the world concern us, and still less the interpretations of modern novelists of the occult sciences. Here I reproduce a symbol, the character of the adepts, which serves as the title page to a book printed in Amsterdam in 1666 by an unknown author who knew a great deal. It is the symbol and the key of the initiated Rosicrucian, true and functional. I relate the symbol to those many of you who, possessing the rudiments of the Latin language, can read many things that, taken straight and in reverse, give the key to truths unheard of in our days. The eternal circle is a rose. It is a symbol, a character, nothing else, but the key to what we Rosicrucians did, to what we practiced, and to how we produced the great and small miracles of the Catholic remedy. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men of good will. So be it also for the integral school. Humble to the point of not imposing, not even in the face of foolishness, our generous utopias on anyone, we make an appeal to all men of sound judgment and good intention, whether they call themselves philosophers, university professors, illustrious physicians, or naturalists. We invoke the participation of everyone in the work of this hermetic realization. Medicine is not an industry. It is a science that dispenses with laboratories, and physicians are, or should feel themselves to be, priests in the face of the pain that afflicts a sick body. This priest, formed and prepared in the experimental schools, lacks in thousands of moments, thousands of times a day, the soul to feel himself in possession of a vivifying and creative spirit, eminently hermetic, that can restore health to a failing organism. Human science is imperfect. Where the hospital, the chemical and microscopic examination reach, therapeutic power does not reach. Many are the schools, many the imperfections. Like with like, and contrary with contrary are two paths that lead to victory when nature is an optimal healer. When not, the two paths lead inexorably to the graveyard, where the incomprehensible disease is fought with insufficient biochemical processes and there is no success. Recourse is had to electricity, apotherapy, serums. But the tormenting forms of certain organic decays, whether they are called tuberculosis, diabetes, Addison's disease, or Bright's disease, are simply called hysteria and epilepsy. They find the therapy useless. I have seen an illustrious physician die of cancer and ask for a remedy, and for a country witch. However, I do not despise science and the progressive conquest of the human mind, and I speak to the generous heart of all those physicians who know that the art is imperfect, even when science holds the chair, and I appeal to their intelligent aid to participate in this attempt at Rosicrucian or Hermetic psychurgy and thaumaturgy. Man possesses forces within himself that are therapeutic par excellence. They are emitted by us, in a healthy state, from the invisible and imponderable currents of animal life that can, in many cases, give the aching organism many of the complements of molecular activity that determine recovery. Let us try. We place ourselves at the service of humanity. Laboratory science will take over later. It has happened thus, from mesmeric magnetism with hypnotism eventually becoming therapy today. It is an empirical medium passed to the universities and used for beneficial purposes. All other remedies, from chamomile to quinine and mercury, have been bequeathed to us by empiricism. Thus it is with these hermetic currents, with these exteriorized forces that our body radiates under certain impressions, or under certain special states. Is magnetism the same? Is it a molecular current of therapeutic virtue? Is it an atomic exteriorization of certain peripheral or central elaborations of the human vital apparatus? Is it an amorphous emission of psychic force capable of assuming all the possible forms of prepared medicines? I do not know. I must not, and we must not, know it now. Today it is undeniable that exceptional organisms, in a condition of pathological sleep or not, called a trance or trance state, expel part of themselves, objectifying the phenomena of light, heat, and movement. Now light, heat, and movement are three elements of life. I affirm that I have always obtained miracles where common therapy was insufficient, and where very rapid results were almost the opposite. I have said miracles. Let no one think that I am going to play Dulcamera in the elixir of love. I have not resurrected corpses that stank after 3 days like Christ. I have not ordered a paralytic with internal bleeding to win a walking race. I have not given sight to 2 empty sockets. I have done small, very small things that do not have the right to be called miracles by a public eager for bravado, but which are true miracles, however small, for those who practice medicine. It is the small attempt of the battery to achieve electric lighting. It is the lid that the steam of a boiler lifts, giving the idea for the steam engine. And I was alone. Now we are many. I believe by some of my calculations, whether correct or not, that if I alone as a single battery have not been able to ring the bell, many batteries will ring a bell in unison. The magic circle, of which I present an ancient figure, should be the indication of a series of psychic centers that synthesized a goal to be realized. Our school will do this as part of a selfless, generous work of ideal and human brotherhood that demands the benevolence of all experimentalists of goodwill. Peace be with us. We steal no one's clients. Where the physician cures, our forces, if our psychic elaborations can be called such, will contribute to his triumph. We will help the physician cure the sick, or we will help the prescribed medicines, so that they may be intelligent, to the point of obeying the idea and the goodwill of the therapist. There are so many people who previously did not believe in exteriorized psychic or nervous forces, and today they believe in them. Perhaps in a few years this too, which is now a paradox, will be believed. The great men will come after us. Conclusion. In San Remo, at the Via de la Esperanza, I reasoned thus: useful ideas make their way despite all obstacles and indifference. This idea of ours, permeated with much love, stripped of arrogance, which does not diminish anyone's rights, and which is the bearer of an experimental contribution to human wisdom, will make its way. Where we will be ineffective and powerless, clearer minds will see the way to do it better. Philolethus says, commenting on Ripley's letter to Henry IV of England, if the operations are regular and the premise is true, the Hermetic Magistery has been achieved. This is what human integration must take into account. Stripped of all the follies and clumsiness of magical empiricism, Hermeticism, as a path to reach the ideal of human angelization, must attempt to establish itself in the experimental realm, and with an indisputable beneficial purpose. Integral or Hermetic medicine achieves the miracle of the resurrection of illuminated reason. I laugh if inept people, skeptical due to inertia of thought, say that we are wasting our time. We will not waste a single minute. We will proceed by testing, experimenting, correcting ourselves, and inquiring, in the service of the search for a divine virtue that the world does not know, much less exactly similar to itself. Lull, Avicenna, Paracelsus, G. B. van Helmont, Pico della Mirandola, Bori, or Cagliostro made use of it. Will we have better fortune this time? From success to success, we will reach Rome to heal the wounds of the apostolic pilgrims, and, who knows, perhaps, Galileo's eyes and Giordano Bruno's burns.